Down bad, Keith. Christian Wood
Yeah.
out 8 weeks. We're now at a point where within a few days we got, well, Jared Vanderbilt may not be ready for training camp. He got injured February 1st. May not be ready for training camp. Not good. And
Yep.
now Christian Wood, the two guys at the end of last season where we were saying, man, it would be nice if they had Christian Wood and Jared Vanderbilt. We're going into this next season. Man, it would be nice if they had Christian Wood and Jared Vanderbilt out 8 weeks. Now, 8 weeks is the reevaluation timeline the Lakers gave. They are notorious for overestimating those or underestimating, whatever. It's usually longer than what they say. So they're notorious for that. So it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't get reevaluated till closer towards the tail end of November rather than mid-November. And then he'd have to ramp up, even if he's given the green light there. So we probably don't see Christian Wood on the basketball floor until sometime in December at the earliest. This is a tough blow for a Lakers team that is not very deep, despite having 15 roster spots filled. They're not a deep team, and they were definitely going to rely upon Christian Wood a bit. They didn't add anything over the summer aside from Dalton Connect. As a rookie, you brought in Bronny James too, but I wouldn't expect him to play a lot. So Christian Wood being out is actually kind of a big deal for maybe the Lakers should call on Day'Ron Sharpe. They should be making that call right now.
Honestly, not a bad idea, right? Like
Yeah.
that he'd come in and be, if not the best backup they have on the roster, he'd be right there with Jackson Hayes.
Yeah.
That's what worries me is two things now. Jared Vanderbilt and Christian Wood both out, two guys who could presumably both play the 5 on backup units. Jared Vanderbilt, a very small ball 5, but you could get away with it against a lot of backup groups. And Christian Wood clearly could play the 5 against backup groups, at least we hope. Yeah. Now you've got really your only 2 5s on the roster that are standard guys are Davis, who doesn't really like to play the 5, doesn't love everything, comes along with it. But I think where that ship is not only sailed, that thing's halfway around the planet now. You're a 5, that is what it is. And then you've got Jackson Hayes. And then your next guy is Colin Castleton is on a 2-way, right? Yep. I'm not missing anybody, I don't think. And that's where, not that it's a bad thing to replace Taurean Prince with Dalton Connect, but at least Taurean Prince could play the 4 in some lineups. Dalton Connect's not. Dalton Connect's a 2-3 versus a 3-4. So yeah, they're just going to be really small, and you're going to have to experiment and play around with some small ball stuff, because the last thing you want to do is, all right, right out of the gate, AD, you got to play 38, 40 minutes a game. You can't do that, right? So you're going to have to trust Jackson Hayes. Jackson Hayes' big thing is, can you stay on the floor without fouling? Like that's going to be the big thing for him. And to the other point you made, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute here, Lakers don't have roster spots. So it's not like it is, all right, who's the best big man left that we can go get to plug in for 10 minutes a night for the first couple months of the season? That's not an easy conversation for them to have, because there isn't anybody to go get, because they don't have an open roster spot. Now, nothing says they can't eat some money, but you're already challenged with where your tax bill is at and some other stuff. So that's going to be another thing. Yeah. That's another thing you're going to have to work around. I think they are, by my calculations, they're like $45K under the second apron right now. So like you're really kind of stuck there. In trades, I mean, if trades are easy, so we would have already seen one. So yeah, and I spent some of this morning like looking around. And I was like, all right, who's a big that's like on the end of somebody's bench that's maybe not going to play very much that they could go get that would make sense? And the list is just not very long, because either they're not good enough to invest anything in going to get them, or they make just a little too much money to make a trade very feasible. That's where this starts to get really challenging for the Lakers. Is there's just not somebody where it's like, all right, go get that guy, because some of these guys, even the tough part is even making a deal for a guy who makes like $12 million is not an easy thing for the Lakers to go do.
Yeah, you'd have to do something around Gabe Vincent, and he's got negative value, or Jared Vanderbilt, and and he's hurt right now, or at least we're not sure where he's at. So these aren't guys that teams are going to say, "Oh yeah, we'll give you so and so for this guy." They're going to say, "Well, what are you going to give me in addition? What are you going to give me for taking on this guy?" And that's the problem that they're facing. So
And
This is a
even
tough
if you
spot.
did like sorry to interrupt you, but even if
No,
you
you're
threw
fine.
like Jalen Hood Shafino in, like him and
Mhm.
Gabe Vincent, and said, all right, go get a $15 million player, you can't because you're only 45K under the second apron. And if you go over that, that triggers you can't aggregate and the trade wouldn't be allowed. So
Right.
that's where that becomes very difficult to pull off. You're just in a really, really difficult spot here. And I know everybody's going to go, we'll just trade D'Lo, right? And yeah, I get it. But D'Lo is your starting point guard right now. Like you did, that starts to become, all right, well, we fixed this hole. Oh, great. Now we have another hole that we have to go fix.
Right.
And I fully yeah, you can play Austin Reeves at the point, you can slide him over. Maybe people are like, all right, play Gabe Vincent, but it's just you're starting to create holes other places to try to patch this up. And then what if we get to, I don't know, October, Halloween, and Jared Vanderbilt's like, actually, I feel pretty good. I'm ready to go. Now it's like, wait, what did we do all this for?
Right.
Like why? Now we don't have a point guard, and that's something we got to go fix. So it does become a little bit of a challenge right now, and that's that's just kind of where they're at with with where they're sitting. And I'd be very, very careful of what I like to call over trading future draft picks, meaning we traded a pick just to try to get some help for right now in to
Yep.
finish this. It's one thing if we're at the trade deadline and the Lakers are like fourth in the Western Conference and playing great. Then if you're like, hey, we can do this and this puts us in the upper echelon and we're going to make a real run, then go do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Then you go and you do something, but I think it speaks to just how thin this team is when they made a push last year, post All-Star break, without Christian Wood, without Jared Vanderbilt. They didn't have either one of those guys. And so you look at this roster, you go, well, okay, why is this such a big deal? It's because of that Torian Prince piece that you mentioned. At
Yep.
least even then, you had AD, you had Jackson Hayes in the middle. Is that ideal? No, it's not enough depth. But at least you had Torian Prince that could play the 3, and that could push Rui Hachimura to the 4. So you had somebody else at the 4. Right now, if there is no Jared Vanderbilt, there is no Christian Wood, and Wood again had that knee. They called it a procedure. It's just a less scary way of saying surgery.
Yeah.
So right now, your backup 4 behind LeBron, I think it's Cam Reddish. I mean, that's probably your backup. Like realistically, you're going to stagger things so that Rui is getting most of the Rui Hachimura, who's 6'8". He's getting, going to get a lot of those minutes. He's sturdier than Cam. But right now, if you were to map it out, like who's your backup 4, it's probably Cam, and that's a bit scary. And again, part of that comes into Torian Prince. You lost him. He went on a minute. Had you had a roster spot, he probably would have stayed, but you didn't have a roster spot to give him. He took a minimum contract with Milwaukee, and now they're kind of in this spot where the position we were saying all summer long they needed to add another big. Now they really need to add another big, and not addressing the position this summer, not addressing that position really last summer either. It's coming back to haunt them. So we'll see what they do, if they're able to plug that leak or not. But right now, they're going to be struggling, I think, to try to figure out what to do in the middle, especially if Jackson Hayes finds himself in foul trouble, which that's been an issue for him in the past.
Yeah, and just to really kind of make it, can you pull that back up real quick?
Yeah.
Sorry. So right above our pictures, Jalen Hood Shafino this year, $3.879 million. Just to illustrate, and I'm only doing this to illustrate how tight to the margin it is for the Lakers. They are hard capped at the first apron, right? If I remember correctly. Am I right? They may not be.
No, they're
but
not.
They would
they're
be.
They're above the first apron.
The first apron.
They're over the first apron. They're 45K shy of the second apron.
Not hard capped at the first apron. So let me rephrase this. They're not hard capped at the first apron, but one of the things that means they can't do is take more salary in a trade. Let's just say the Lakers said, you know what? Day'Ron Sharpe's our guy. We're going to go, we're going to give up one of the first round picks and Jalen Hood Shafino for Day'Ron Sharpe. They can't, because he makes about $100K more than Jalen Hood Shafino does. So they would not be able to make that trade. They could not take on more money. So that and the only reason I brought that up is because that's one that could really make sense. But it illustrates that's how tight to the margins this is and how difficult it's going to be for the Lakers and really any team in their situation. But right now, we're talking about them to make a move, even if it is like, hey, we have this move that makes sense. Hey, you're rebuilding, you've got other bigs, you want a guard to kind of throw in there, and it maybe even, but now, and the reason why I said the first is because I think the Nets would be all over that, but they can't even do it. So that just gives you an idea of how difficult this is.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's certainly not going to be easy for them to sort through all of this and figure out a path forward. But you know what? They did nothing at the trade deadline this last year. They did nothing this summer. At some point, they're going to do something. We'll see if it's in time to fix this center position.
It's going to have to be one of those top 7 salaries on the page right now. It's not going to be LeBron. It's not going to be AD. So let's say one of the next 5 down: Russell, Hachimura, Reeves, Vincent, or Vanderbilt. Because those are the 5 guys that make between 10 and 20 million. There have to be 1 or 2 of them that go in a deal. And that's going to be how it gets done. Because it's not going to be LeBron. It's not going to be AD.
No.
And the rest of the guys, they just don't make enough money for it to matter. Because you start stacking them together. Well, now you have to come in under the second apron. You can't stack because then you get hard capped at the second apron. As we said, they're only 45K away. So that becomes a huge challenge. So it's going to be tough for them to do it. Not impossible. There's moves they could make. You'd hop on Spot Track, pull up the trade machine, go nuts. You can even toggle the filters off and set it to be trade deadline day if you want to pretend like you're trading then, which would take some of these traders like Max Christie can't be traded till January 15th.
Right.
If you want to knock that restriction off, you can do that. It'll still, keep other guys out there. But yeah, I don't see there's not one that just sometimes there's trades where it's like, yep, there it is. And then some version of that trade happens. We're like, all right, we all saw that coming. There isn't one of those that just jumps off the page.
Yeah, there's definitely not. Definitely not.